Welcome to Time for Hope, a faith-based mental health program. Join our host, certified clinical mental health counselor and Christian psychotherapist Dr. Frida Cruz, and her guests as they discuss real-life issues and offer expert clinical advice and solid biblical application for any and all life situations. Now, here's the host of Time for Hope, Dr. Frida Cruz.
Thank you for joining me for another edition of Time for Hope. Know that I appreciate all of you and pray that God will use what my guest and I are about to share with you to inform and, if needed, empower you to make changes in your life and marriage. My guest for today and again next week is licensed counselor and life coach, author and international speaker Leslie Vernick, and she is here to share with us from her book titled The Emotionally Destructive Marriage. If you suspect that you are in such a marriage, Leslie and I will be sharing directions and strategies that can help you make changes that can stop the destruction and empower you to move towards a better future. For more, stay with us. Leslie, it's great having you back on Time for Hope.
I am so pleased to be back. Thanks for inviting me.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has been a while.
And you've been a busy girl since then, right?
I have been.
Yes, I've written several books, I think, since you were here, and but still along the same line. This seems to be a focus that God has given you.
He has. It wouldn't have been one I chose, but I think it's a voice that's needed. We haven't talked about this in the church. We haven't talked about this very clearly to men and women about how to repair destructive relationships or destructive marriages. And so, you know, God called me to kind of have a unique voice in this whole genre.
Yes. Are you of the opinion, and it appears from some of the questions and some of the things that I read in your book, that many people are in destructive marriages and don't want to admit it or don't recognize that they are or aren't willing to face the truth and make the changes?
You know, Frida, I think a lot of men and women are in destructive marriages, and obviously if we see any kind of abuse, we would hopefully realize that that's a destructive marriage, but there's other kinds of destructive marriages. But most women and men who are in destructive marriages feel it. They feel controlled, they feel confused, they feel a lot of pain, they feel like they want to end the relationship, or they don't want to be in this relationship, they don't know how to fix this relationship, they feel demeaned, dismissed. And so in that sense, they know something's really wrong. They may not know it's got a name, but they know something's really wrong with their marriage.
But then there are those in destructive marriages that know that something is wrong and spend a lot of time and energy and health and so forth trying to get the destruction out and don't know how to go about it, and then many give in to keep the peace, and as you bring out in your book, that can make things worse even. And
it actually can. God calls us to be peacemakers, not peacekeepers or peace fakers. And I think so many people, you know, just kind of collude with evil and collude with destruction because they're afraid to speak out against it, because they know it's going to cause more conflict in their marriage, and yet by colluding with that, it's only making things worse.
In a little bit, we're going to let you define a destructive marriage, but when we talk along that line, one thing I have learned, if you do give in to abusive people, and it's usually a man that is abusive, it's almost like a vampire that feeds off your blood at some point. As you continue giving in, they get something out of abusing, or they wouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. And you agree with me on that?
You know, I think power is very intoxicating. And the more someone can have power over you, whether it's physical power, financial power, sexual power, you know, we think of rape as sexual power over someone, but there's other kinds of power, spiritual power, and people do get something out of being powerful. And so oftentimes abuse does feed off of itself. When an abuser has a willing victim or someone who doesn't protest or doesn't implement consequences, the abuse only gets progressive, it gets more frequent, it gets usually more serious. And so that's one of the reasons I wrote this book. I wanted to teach, especially women, because they often don't have a voice, especially Christian women in a church don't have a voice because of this whole idea of headship and submission, how to empower them to rebalance this power struggle or power imbalance in the marriage so that they can have the best shot at trying to help their husband come to truth and reality so their marriage can be restored.
They really aren't helping their husband by enabling them, and I hope in this with this show, and of course it's in your book very clearly and plainly, that women can come to see the truth that they're enabling, and that they're actually not helping their husband by doing that. They're not helping themselves either.
Right. I think one of the things that women have been taught in Christian counseling, as well as from their pastors and church, is that they should try harder. If the marriage isn't going well and the woman goes to counseling and she's told, just try harder to be submissive, try harder to love him more, try harder to, make his favorite meals, try harder to meet his needs. And Frida, honestly, in some marriages that might be really good advice, because when one person tries harder, it often begets a reciprocal response, and the other person tries harder, and it begins to start a forward momentum that's positive in their marriage. But in these kind of marriages where there's destruction, abuse, deceit, all those kind of things, trying harder only actually feeds the lie, and it feeds two lies of the woman, one lie of the man. The lie of the woman is, if I try harder, then somehow I can get him to love me. If I try harder, somehow I can get him to stop the abuse. And that's a lie, because the more she tries, the more he will abuse because he can. And
that's very often present. The need for love, the need to be loved and to know that they're loved is very often present in a destructive marriage. And of course, as you know, as I know, that very often dates back to the early home of environment, and missing what they needed then, and getting married and still missing it.
And somehow believing that if I could only figure out what I'm doing wrong, then this person will love me. That's a childhood issue as well as an adult issue. But the truth is, love isn't earned. And so love is a gift. And you can't do something right to earn love, just like you can't do something wrong to lose love. It's a gift that someone gives us. And so this lie that if only I try harder, he'll love me, or he'll stop abusing me because he's abusing me. And then the second lie is, it's somehow my fault that he's abusing me, that I'm not doing something right, I'm not submitting enough, I'm not making his favorite meals enough, I'm not having sex enough, I'm not doing this enough or that enough, and that's why he's abusing me. And that lie is also the lie of the husband, that if only she were different, I wouldn't act this way. In other words, I'm entitled to a perfect wife who never disappoints me, never frustrates me, never says no to me, always loves me in the way I want her to love me, never does anything that upsets me. And if she doesn't do that, I have the right to abuse her.
Yes. Well, you're right about the headship and submission. I don't tackle that very often because it's so misused, and misunderstood is probably a better word. But I can remember many years ago a woman telling me that she was being abused by her husband, and she went to a counselor, went to a pastor, and he did instruct her just to pray harder and to try harder to please the husband, and to continue the submission and giving in. And that's
and to suffer for Jesus.
Yes, that really used to be quite common that women were told that. And so I'm glad you took that up in your book and you've explained it. You did a great job, I think, of bringing other scriptures in and laying it out and getting helping the women get that straight.
Yeah,
I have always said this: if men would follow the rest of chapter Ephesians 5, I believe that's where it is, right? And do what it talks about,
like
which is several more verses more than the woman to be submissive to the husband. By the way, that's a voluntary subjection. It doesn't mean submission like
you can't force someone to submit.
You can't force someone to commit. That the wife would be very willing to voluntarily submit if he did the rest of the chapter like the scriptures lay it out.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think we often give men this pressure, like, if only you were the great husband that you should be, just like the wife, if only you were the great wife that you should be, your husband would be this way. I think of the Father, the Heavenly Father who loves us, and yet we still struggle submitting to him. So I think that this whole idea, if the husband was the great lover or if the wife was the great submitter, somehow the other person would do the right thing, isn't quite accurate.
Maybe not always, but I still think it would help.
It would help. Both sides would help.
I still think it would help. So let's talk about destructive marriages. Why don't you just, as we're getting close to going out on a break, why don't you define a destructive marriage?
Well, a destructive marriage is often misdefined as a difficult marriage or a disappointing marriage. But it's more than that. Certainly there are difficult marriages where you have a lot of pressures on the marriage, a lot of stressors. You have disappointing marriages where, he doesn't make as much money as I thought he would. She's not as sexual as I want her to be. But a destructive marriage is where one person in the marriage is regularly dominated, degraded, deceived, diminished, and eventually destroyed. And that kind of pattern in a relationship is far more than just difficult and disappointing. It destroys the very personhood of the other, and it destroys the fabric of the marriage as God intended. And so that's what a destructive marriage is versus a disappointing and destructive marriage. And also, it's accompanied by a lack of awareness. The other person who's destroying the other, diminishing, controlling, deceiving, they don't take any responsibility. They don't own what they've done wrong, and they're not willing to make amends, repent, and work toward repairing the relationship. If they were, then it wouldn't be destructive. It would be difficult and they would work on things. But what makes it destructive is that this pattern continues again and again and again, and there is no change, there is no repair, and therefore there can be no healing.
In those kinds of marriages, the one that is being abused, as it were, and it's usually the woman, unless she learns how to confront about what is going on. In her attempts to confront, she very often just creates more problems.
I put a bunch of videos on my website for women who don't have that, because I just felt, as I was writing this book, I'm thinking, there's women who can't afford this book, there's women that they were afraid to have the book in their house, and so any woman or man can go to my website. There's about 15 short little 5-minute videos that they can read about or watch about submission and headship. They can watch about why trying harder is destructive. They can watch about, what do you do, how do you speak to your husband, and so there'll be little tips on those on my website that would help them, because you're right, they don't know how, and the church isn't teaching people how to do it.
Well, I think that's something good to go out on for a break, and we will be right back. As a new therapist, I was soon seeing women who were experiencing severe abuse from their husbands. They had no bruises or broken bones. Instead, they were depressed, fearful, confused, ashamed, feeling down on themselves, and holding little hope related to their marriages. Instead of physical abuse, their husbands' tongues and other behaviors became their weapons as they sought to control by intimidation, ridicule, put-downs, sabotaging their relationship with their children, angry outbursts, and threats of physical harm. The reality is that verbal, psychological, and sexual abuse can be more destructive, although not as dangerous as physical abuse. Instead of being physically beaten, dragged, shoved, kicked, or raped, emotionally abused spouses or partners are beaten, shoved, and raped verbally and emotionally, ending up with broken hearts instead of broken bones, with damaged emotions and low self-esteem instead of visible bruises, being stripped of their personhood instead of being physically raped. I have had clients tell me that they would rather take a physical beating because broken bones and bruises can heal, wherein the constant emotional and psychological assaults continue to keep their inner wounds open and bleeding. Is there help for destructive relationships of all kinds? Yes, but one or both partners in the relationship must accept the truth that their relationship is destructive. There is hope and help when either the abuser or abused is willing to accept the truth of their situation and seek professional help. Most often, it will require the abused to take responsibility for their healing and freedom and seek appropriate help to end the abuse. This might require exiting the relationship either temporarily or permanently if the abuser refuses to cooperate in making the necessary changes. Sadly, many women have turned to their pastors for help only to be reminded that it is their duty to submit to their abusive husbands. Children of religious leaders too often relate to growing up in a home where their pastor or missionary father beat them and their mother regularly or subjected them to emotional and psychological abuse. The truth is that Christian wives and children are not commanded by the Scriptures to submit to such controlling and authoritative behavior. I challenge the abusers to get honest with yourselves and seek to find the root of your abusive behavior. I challenge the abused to accept full responsibility for your freedom, healing, and emotional health. The Apostle Paul asserted, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." Thank you for staying with us on Time for Hope. Our guest for today is Leslie Vernick, and we're talking about her book, The Emotionally Destructive Marriage. And you've already given us a definition of a destructive marriage, Leslie. And in your book, you actually give several pages that where they can test their marriages to see if they're in a destructive marriage, which I think was very, very good in answering that they could, first of all, look at themselves and see where they're, what they're doing in the marriage if they have an idea it's destructive. But these questions help them clarify that, whether or not.
And in what way it's destructive. Because I talk about 5 different kinds of destructive, whether it's physically abusive, emotionally abusive, verbally abusive, or whether it's controlling without abuse, whether it's deceiving on a chronic way, whether someone's overly dependent on you to make their world happen and for you to be their God or for them to be your God, or whether they're just indifferent. Because sometimes we don't even talk about indifference as abusive in marriage or destructive. And when someone refuses to give you any of their time, their energy, their money, they don't care that you have any feelings or any thoughts, that can be very destructive when you're married to someone, because marriage is a relationship where you've actually promised not to be indifferent. And so when someone is chronically indifferent to you as a person, it becomes very destructive to you and to the marriage.
Of course. And then there is a spiritual destructiveness with spiritual leaders sometimes. Many people that profess to be spiritual leaders, pastors and church leaders and so forth, are not the same at home behind closed doors as they are out in public in ministry, so to speak.
I have a particular burden for women in ministry, with their husbands in ministry, because they have no one to talk to, because it is such a scary thing for them, because it's not only about their marriage, it's about their livelihood. And if they start spilling the beans about their husband's behavior at home, not only do they risk the potential of losing their marriage, but their support and their, I've worked with missionaries who just feel afraid to talk, pastors' wives who feel afraid to talk, and I just feel so bad for them, because there is nowhere for them to go that's a safe place. And so we need to create some of those safe places. And I think there are some ministries to pastor's wife where they can go now, but you're right, there's a man in the pulpit and there's a man at home, and they're not always the same.
And the children suffer from that. Also, of course, they suffer in destructive marriages, children do.
I think I'm so glad you brought that up, because so many women say, this marriage is awful, but for the children's sake, I'm going to stay married. But the women I talk to who made that choice often regret that for the children's sake, now the children are married to abusers or are abusers themselves, and they're just as destructive as they grew up in. And so the sins of the fathers and the mothers do get passed down to the next generations. And so staying together at all costs, at any price, may be too high a price. In fact, I just did a speaking event a couple of weeks ago where the church was in a chaos because the pastor murdered his wife. And so here we have a pastor who murdered his wife, but spousal abuse, but murdered her. And so here we have this pastor who's creating this church environment of I'm your shepherd, I'm the good shepherd, I'm representing Christ to you, and yet at home he was a completely different person. And not only did his children suffer, the whole church suffered. And so we think about staying together at all costs, any price. Sometimes it's too high a price.
When I was in private practice, I can remember telling a couple, look, I'm not here to help you keep this marriage for the children. You know, if that's why you're staying together and that's what you want me to help you to do, then we're not on the same track. A marriage should not be held together just for the children. You agree with me on that?
Well, I think that research has shown that the children do better if both parents are healthy parents and can stay together. So sometimes I would say that that's not a bad goal if it's a difficult, disappointing marriage, all right? If there's a lot of stressors and they say, you know what, I think I'm out of here, I'm tired of this.
Well, they wouldn't have been in counseling if it wasn't a difficult, distressing
Right, that's what I'm saying.
marriage.
If it's difficult and disappointing, sometimes it is worth hanging in there for the children because you can turn that around. When it's destructive and abusive, no. That the children can be destroyed in the process of trying to hold that marriage together.
So what is it that you can turn around if it's not? I mean, how would you even talk about turning a marriage around if it's not destructive?
Well, if you're in marriage counseling, for example, and we're talking about a disappointing marriage, like, you know what, she's not as, I just got an email from a woman in a foreign country, said, my husband's telling me I'm not as beautiful as he wishes I were. Okay, now that's a horrible thing for a woman to hear from her husband. She's disappointed. She's not as thin as she used to be. She's not as attractive as she used to be. I think there's some things that they can do to work on that if they're both willing and to stay together.
But that's not just for the children, though, if they work on it.
You're right. If that's the long-term goal, to stay together just for the children. But sometimes that's part of the short-term goal if we stay together for the children as we work on our marriage. Our marriage isn't going well.
All righty. Well, we need to move on and talk about, first of all, lay it out to women that they are responsible to initiate change.
Well, the only person who can change in a destructive marriage is the one who's feeling the pain. And it's often the woman, because a person who's getting away with everything, they don't feel any pain. Why would they change? They have no reason to change. And so when I'm working with a woman who's saying, how can we change my husband? How can we change my husband? I try to think that the change has to start with them. And that the change is, if you're an abuse victim, and you're an abuse victim again and again and again, you have to begin to ask yourself, what's your part? Why are you enabling this? Why are you allowing this to happen to yourself? Why are you putting up with someone treating you this way? And so often it's because I'm afraid to speak up, or I don't feel very good about myself, or if I speak up and he leaves me, I don't have any means of support. There's lots of valid and not so good reasons why someone allows someone to mistreat them, but you're right. A woman has to begin the change process by looking within and saying, what do I need to do to get strong enough to do two things? Speak up, and if my husband will not hear me, and how do I speak up well? And if he will not hear to me, how do I get strong enough to implement some tough consequences so now he doesn't get the perks of a great marriage when he continues to destroy me?
Yeah. I guess we could give the men a break here and say that sometimes it's the man that sees that the marriage is destructive and sees that changes need to be made. So maybe we should go and say whoever recognizes that the marriage is in trouble and changes need to be made accepts that responsibility, initiates.
And I have a perfect example of a man who was very unhappy in his marriage. His wife was very controlling. She wanted to, control all the finances and control what he wore and what he ate and what he did with his free time. And he was becoming more and more passive and more depressed and more angry, passive-aggressive kind of stuff. And so he was ready to leave the marriage. And I said, another approach would be that you need to work on yourself and why you've allowed yourself to be so crushed as a man that you aren't having a voice anymore. And so he began to speak up to his wife and began to make a change in him that I don't want to be passive anymore. I'm not going to allow you to control what I wear anymore and what I do. And that created a little crisis for her.
Of course.
And they had to begin to change that dynamic or not. but at least he gave it a shot.
Yeah, I think we've got to go out for this week, but I would like to pick up with next week that whole idea of initiating change and the warning that you give of what could happen when change is initiated, but we want to pick up there. Can you remember that's where we want to pick up next week on initiating change in the marriage and how we start that and so on and so forth. We've talked about who can do it and so forth. So you just sit right there, and I'll be back. I have some things to share with my viewers, and then we'll start the second week's show. And I have a letter from a viewer that reads, "Dear Dr. Frieda, I want prayer to stay obedient to the Word of God. I filed for divorce but withdrew it because I felt I had no biblical grounds for divorce and because God hates divorce. My husband has been abusive to me in our marriage. We are separated and I do not trust him and can't live with him. Please pray that I will have God's wisdom to do the right thing." That is a very legitimate prayer request, and be assured that we already have covered this request in prayer or will be doing so here with my staff. And then I have a word of encouragement. "Dear Dr. Frieda, your program, Time for Hope, is a blessing and a great encouragement to me and my family that is encouraging. We love you all. Most of all, Jesus loves you." And of course, that's encouraging me, and I know that Jesus loves me, and I know that he loves you, and that gives us something, as it were, it gives us great hope when we know that we are loved by the Lord Jesus Christ. What we would like to do, you to do is join us again next week on Time for Hope as we continue discussing Leslie's book titled The Emotionally Destructive Marriage.
A free fact sheet that contains additional information about today's topic is available upon request from our ministry. You can also receive a copy of today's resource for a contribution of any amount to the Time for Hope ministry. To receive our free fact sheet or our guest book or both, you may call us at 800-669-9133. Write us at Post Office Box 2169, Spartanburg, South Carolina 29304. Or visit our website at timeforhope.org. When you call or write, prayerfully consider a donation to our ministry. Our ministry's mission is to offer hope to discouraged and hurting people. As we continue to give out messages of hope, a financial gift of any amount to support this ministry will be greatly appreciated. When you do this, you are joining us in offering hope to many viewers seeking help and hope for their situation. This will also enable us to inform and inspire some viewers to expand our mission, as they learn and in turn can minister more effectively to hurting people around them. To see this program again online, go to our website or search for Time for Hope TV on YouTube, iTunes, and Facebook. Until next time, have a great week. And remember, it is time for hope.